The email came in at 9:47 on the Tuesday morning. I remember the time because I had just poured my second cup of coffee, the kind I make with chicory, because my doctor said I needed to cut back on caffeine. But I told him I'd been drinking coffee since I was 12 years old and I wasn't about to stop now. The mug was the one my granddaughter painted for me at one of those pottery places. Lopsided handle and a little smear of pink glaze where her thumb had been. I set it down on the kitchen counter, picked up my phone, and read the words that ended 38 years of believing I knew who my son was. My name is Henrietta Caldwell. I am 69 years old. I live in a single-story house on Magnolia Bend in Conroe, Texas, about 40 miles north of Houston, on a quiet street where the live oaks are old enough to have watched my children grow up. My husband Wendell passed in the spring of 2021, pancreatic cancer. 6 weeks from diagnosis to the funeral. I thought I knew what loneliness was after that. I was wrong. I didn't know the half of it. I have 2 children. My daughter Marlene lives in Tucson with her wife and their twin boys. She calls me every Sunday at 4 p.m. Central, like clockwork. And she sends me a card on every holiday, including Arbor Day, which is the kind of person she has always been. And then there's my son, Reginald, the baby of the family, the one I rocked through colic for 3 months straight while Wendell was working double shifts at the refinery, the one I drove to football practice in a 1987 Buick Century with a busted air conditioner because we couldn't afford to fix it, the one I co-signed a student loan for when he wanted to go to Texas A&M, the one who married a woman named Courtney from a family in the Woodlands that owns 3 dental practices and a vineyard in Fredericksburg. I never disliked my daughter-in-law. I want to say that first, because what comes next might sound like I did. I didn't. I tried. Lord, did I try? I went to her bridal shower and brought a Le Creuset Dutch oven, because my sister told me that's what young women want now. I babysat their first daughter, my granddaughter Aubrey, 2 days a week for the first 18 months of her life, so Courtney could go back to her job at the marketing firm. I drove 40 minutes each way, and I never asked for a dime. I just wanted to be in their lives. I wanted to matter. So when I started planning the family reunion, the 70th birthday celebration that was really also a memorial of sorts for Wendell, I thought I was building something, not buying something. Building. There's a difference, and I want you to understand that. It started in October of last year. I was sitting at the kitchen table, going through Wendell's old letters, the ones he wrote me when he was stationed in Germany before we got married, and I came across a photograph. The 2 of us at Crystal Beach, on the Bolivar Peninsula. Wendell with his arm around me, both of us so young, the wind off the Gulf doing something foolish to my hair. I remembered then how much he loved that stretch of coast, how every anniversary for the first 10 years of our marriage, we'd drive down there with a cooler full of sandwiches and watermelon. We stopped going after Reginald was born because babies and beach trips don't mix, and then life just kept happening and we never went back. I held that photograph for a long time, and I thought, I'm going to take everyone there, the whole family, my daughter and her wife and the twins, Reginald and Courtney and their 2 girls. We'd rent a big house right on the beach, cook crab legs and shrimp boil, sit around a fire pit and tell stories. I'd turned 70 on the 3rd day of the trip, and I imagined all of us with our feet in the sand and a sheet cake and Wendell somewhere in the breeze, watching. That was the picture in my head. That was the whole thing. I started a savings account just for the trip. I called it the Bolivar account in my mind, though the bank just labeled it Savings Sub 3. Every month, from my Social Security and the little bit of widow's pension from Wendell's union, I put aside what I could. Sometimes $200, sometimes $4. Once, in February, I sold my mother's china cabinet to a woman who came down from Plano in a pickup truck, and I put the whole $800 in that account and didn't even feel sad about it. I told myself the cabinet had been gathering dust for 15 years. This was the kind of memory that mattered now. By March, I had nearly $14,000 saved. I called Reginald first. I always call Reginald first, which is something I'm going to have to think about for the rest of my life. He picked up on the fourth ring, which meant he saw it was me and waited a beat. He always does that. I pretended I'd never noticed. Mom, hey, kind of in the middle of something. What's up? I told him the idea. The house on the beach. The whole family. My birthday. Wendell's anniversary the same week. Did he remember? I could hear him on the other end, doing two things at once, the way he always does, clicking on a keyboard while he talked. Yeah, sure, that sounds nice. Let me ask Courtney. That should have been my first sign. But a mother's hope is a stubborn animal. I called my daughter next, and Marlene cried. Actually cried. She said, Mom, that's the most beautiful thing I've ever heard. Yes. Yes, 1,000 times yes. The boys have never seen the ocean, and we talked for an hour about logistics, about whether her wife Tasha could get the time off, about what to pack for 6-year-olds at the beach. Reginald called me back 2 days later. Courtney was on speakerphone, which I didn't know until halfway through the conversation. They said yes. They said it sounded wonderful. They said Courtney would be happy to help me find the right rental property because she had a good eye for that kind of thing. I told her I was so grateful. I meant it. I thought she was reaching out. That was my second mistake, letting her in. Over the next 6 weeks, Courtney took over the planning. Not in a hostile way. Not at first. She would text me listings on Verbo, beautiful houses with Gulf views and outdoor showers and chef's kitchens. She'd say, Henrietta, what do you think of this one? It sleeps 14. She always called me Henrietta. Never Mom. Never Mama call, like the grandkids did. Always Henrietta, polite and clipped, and a little bit cold. I'd told myself for 9 years that's just how she was raised. Country club manners. She found the house. A 6-bedroom, 3-bathroom property right on the seawall in Galveston, with a wraparound deck and a private boardwalk down to the sand. The rental was $4,200 for the week, plus a cleaning fee and a security deposit. With the airfare for Marlene's family and the groceries I was planning to buy, and the rental car I'd need to pick everyone up and a few activities for the kids, I figured the whole trip would run me close to $11,000. I had it, just barely, but I had it. Courtney offered to be the point of contact for the rental. She said she had a Verbo account already, that it would be easier to manage cancellations and communications through her, that she could put it on her card and I could just sell her the money. I did. $4,200 sent on a Thursday afternoon in early February. I have the screenshot. I've looked at it more times than I want to admit. The next 2 months were the happiest I'd been since Wendell died. I'm telling you that, not because it's pretty, but because it's true. I was sleeping better. I was humming in the kitchen. I sent my granddaughters little packages with sand pails and beach books. I bought a new swimsuit at Dillard's, the first one I bought in over a decade. A navy blue tankini with a little ruffle at the bottom that the saleslady said was very flattering, and I believed her. I let myself believe a lot of things. In April, Courtney started getting strange about the planning. Little things at first. She didn't want me to bring my niece Yolanda, who's like a daughter to me, even though I'd offered to pay for her gas down from Lufkin. Courtney said the house was already going to be crowded. Then she said the kids were going to need their own bedrooms, and could I sleep in the bunk room instead of the master? I said, of course, whatever works. Then she said maybe we shouldn't do the big sheet cake, because Aubrey was on a sugar reduction plan from her pediatric dietitian, and she didn't want to confuse her about birthdays and food. I bit the inside of my cheek and said okay. I called Marlene one night, late, and I told her something didn't feel right. Marlene was quiet for a long time. Then she said, Mom, listen to me. If anything happens down there, you call me. You call me and you get on a plane and you come to Tucson. Do you understand? I laughed it off. I said she was being dramatic. I said Courtney was just stressed about logistics. Marlene didn't laugh. The week of the trip, I drove out to H-E-B and spent $416 on groceries. Crab legs, shrimp, 2 whole snapper because Reginald used to love when his father grilled snapper on the half shell. A case of LaCroix because Courtney only drank that. Watermelon, corn. The good butter, the European kind. I packed a cooler so big I had to ask a teenager in the parking lot to help me lift it into the trunk of my Camry. I drove home and I unpacked everything carefully, and I sat in my kitchen and I made a list of what I'd cook on what night. And I felt, for the first time in 3.5 years, like a wife and a mother and a grandmother, and not just an old woman in a house full of an old man's clothes I couldn't bring myself to give away. The email came in at 9:47 on a Tuesday morning, 2 days before I was supposed to drive down to Galveston. The subject line was, "A change of plans." I read it 3 times before I understood what I was reading. I'm going to give it to you the way it came to me, not word for word because I deleted it eventually, but close enough. It said that Courtney and Reginald had discussed it at length and felt that the trip had become more than they originally signed up for. It said Courtney's mother and sister and their families would also be coming down to Galveston that week, and they had decided it would be smoother if it was just the immediate family at the rental house. It said I was welcome to come for dinner one of the evenings, perhaps Wednesday, if I could find lodging nearby. It said they appreciated all my contributions to the planning. It said that they hoped I would understand and not make it personal. Those exact words. Not make it personal. It was signed Reginald, but I knew. I knew the way you know, when the wind shifts before the rain. That was not my son writing. That was a wife writing through a husband. That was Courtney's voice and Reginald's typing fingers, and my son did not have the spine to stop her or the decency to call me himself. I set the phone down. I sat at the kitchen table for what must have been 45 minutes. The coffee went cold. The dishwasher ran its cycle and stopped. The mail truck came and went on the street outside. I didn't move. I just sat there, and I felt myself becoming something I had never been before. Not angry, not sad. Something quieter than both. Something that had been waiting under my ribs for 69 years. When I finally stood up, I knew exactly what I was going to do. I went into the office, the small room off the kitchen where Wendell used to do the bills, and where I now kept the records of everything. I opened my laptop. I logged into the Verbo account, the one I had also been given access to so I could approve the dates, and I read the rental agreement carefully. Cancellation policy, refund window. I had until 11:59 p.m. that night to cancel for a 50% refund. After that, nothing. I did not cancel the rental. I want you to understand that because what I did was something different and more careful. I sent Courtney a message through the Verbo platform, very polite, requesting a copy of all communications and an itemized accounting of the deposit. I knew she wouldn't reply. I just wanted it on the record. Then I called the property management company directly, the one listed on the rental, and I asked to speak to a manager. I explained very calmly that I was the original payer for the booking, that I had a record of the wire transfer, and that I would like to confirm that the credit card on file for the security deposit and any incidental charges was, in fact, mine. The woman on the phone, who was named Marcia and was an angel, looked it up. "Ma'am, the booking is under a Courtney Caldwell. The deposit hold is on her card." "I see," I said. "And the rental fee itself?" "Paid in full by wire transfer in early February." "From whose account?" A long pause. The clicking of a keyboard. "Looks like the wire was from a Henrietta Caldwell, ma'am." "That's you?" "That's me." "Well, ma'am, I have to be honest, that's unusual. The booking party and the payer are usually the same. Is there a problem?" I thought about it for a moment, and then I told her, very simply, that there had been a family disagreement and I was no longer comfortable with the rental going forward in its current arrangement. I asked whether, given that I was the one who had paid for the property, the booking could be canceled and refunded to me directly, minus whatever penalty applied. Marcia said she would have to talk to the owner. The owner, it turned out, was a retired Coast Guard captain named Doug, who lived in Bay City. Marcia called me back 20 minutes later and put him on the line. I told him the whole thing, just the way it had happened. The savings account, the grocery shopping, the email about it not being personal. I told him I was 69 years old and that I had been planning this trip in honor of my late husband and that I had never in my life asked anyone for a special favor. I was just asking him for fairness. Doug was quiet for a moment. Then he said, Ma'am, this is my house. I get to decide who stays in it. If you paid for the rental and you're canceling the rental, I'm refunding you. Full amount minus the platform fees, which I'll cover out of my end. I won't see a woman swindled out of her own beach trip on my watch. I started to cry right there on the phone with a stranger in Bay City. I told him thank you about 100 times. I told him his mother raised him right. He laughed and said, she was a piece of work, but yes, ma'am, she did. By 2 p.m. that Tuesday afternoon, the rental was canceled. The refund was processed back to my account, where it would arrive in 3 to 5 business days. The house was no longer available to anyone for that week. Courtney's family, her mother and her sister, who had presumably been planning to swoop in and turn my anniversary into a Courtney family reunion, had nowhere to stay. Then I called my bank. Now, I want to explain something here, because the comments I've seen on stories like this always ask the same question. How did she pay for everything if her daughter-in-law was the one in control? The answer is, I didn't let her be in control. Not all the way. I am old, but I am not foolish. Wendell taught me a long time ago, when he was healthy, to never put anyone else's name on my accounts, not even our children's. He used to say, Henny, the day you mix accounts is the day you lose your peace. So when Courtney asked, back in January, whether she could be added as an authorized user on my checking account to help with the trip logistics, I told her sweetly that my bank didn't allow that for senior accounts. Which was a lie, but it was a lie I have never once regretted. My bank is a credit union in Conroe, where I've banked for 31 years. I called the branch manager directly, a woman named Wanda who had known Wendell. I told her I needed to put a temporary freeze on a recurring authorization. She walked me through it, the flight credits I had paid for, through a third-party booking site for Marlene's family. Those I left alone. Marlene was still coming, just to a different destination now. But every other authorization tied to that trip, I locked down. The rental car deposit, the catering company Courtney had quietly hired without telling me, that I'd only found out about because the deposit showed up on my statement. The 2 boat charters Reginald had booked for the family that I had paid for. All of it. Frozen. By 4 p.m., Wendell would have been proud of me. I sat on the back porch with a glass of sweet tea, and I watched a cardinal land on the bird feeder, and I felt my own heartbeat in my chest, steady and slow. At 6:14 p.m., Reginald called. I let it ring. He called again at 6:16, and 6:22, and 6:30. By 7 o'clock, he was sending text messages. Mom, what's going on? Mom, Courtney just got an email from the rental company. Mom, we need to talk. Mom, please pick up. At 7:45, Courtney called me from her own phone, the first time she had called me directly in nearly 2 years. I let that ring too. I made myself a small supper, a grilled cheese sandwich and the tomato from the garden. I ate it slowly. I did the dishes. I went and sat in the living room, and I called my daughter. Marlene picked up on the first ring. I told her everything, every part of it, the email, the phone call to Doug, the cancellation, the frozen authorizations. When I was done, Marlene was silent for a long time, and then she said, Mama, get on a plane to Tucson tomorrow. Tasha and I will fly home with you next week. We'll go to the beach, just us. The boys, Tasha's parents are in town and they'd love to come. We'll rent a house in Rockport. We'll do it right. I thought about it. I did. But then I thought about my Camry and my groceries and my new swimsuit, and I told her, Honey, I'm not running. I bought a beach trip. I'm taking a beach trip. I called my niece Yolanda the next morning. I told her the whole story. She said she would be at my house in 2.5 hours. I called my sister-in-law Patrice, Wendell's younger sister, who lives in Beaumont and who had been a widow for 9 years and knew everything there was to know about being unseen. I called my best friend Doreen, who I'd worked with at the elementary school for 22 years before we both retired. I called Cheryl from my church, who had been hinting for 2 years that she wanted to see the Gulf one more time before her knees gave out. By Wednesday afternoon, I had 4 passengers and a cooler full of crab legs and a brand new beach house booked through a different rental company, a smaller place in Surfside, $300 cheaper, 2 blocks from the water, with a porch swing and a propane grill. Doug had even called Marcia and asked her to recommend something to me. That's the kind of man Doug was. We drove down on Thursday morning. 5 women, ages 63 to 77, in my Camry and Yolanda's Tahoe, with enough food for an army and a Bluetooth speaker that Yolanda had loaded up with Aretha Franklin and Patti LaBelle. We sang the whole way down I-45. We stopped at Bookie's in League City, and Patrice bought a $30 t-shirt that said Beach Grandma and put it on in the parking lot. I will not pretend that the next 4 days were not bittersweet. They were. I missed my grandchildren. I missed the picture I had in my head, the one with everyone around the fire pit with Wendell in the breeze. But I want to tell you something I learned that I did not expect to learn. There is a particular kind of laughter that happens between women who have all lost something. It is louder than other laughter. It comes from a deeper place. It does not apologize. On Saturday, the morning of my 70th birthday, Doreen made pancakes. Patrice put a single candle in the middle of the stack. Cheryl gave me a card she'd written by hand. Yolanda had driven down to a bakery in Lake Jackson at 6 in the morning to pick up a small lemon cake. We ate breakfast on the porch with the gulls calling overhead. I cried, but it was not the crying I had done on Tuesday morning. It was the other kind. The kind that empties you out and leaves you clean. That afternoon, my phone, which I had finally turned on after 4 days of silence, lit up with messages. Reginald had left 47 voicemails over the course of the week. I listened to the last one. It was shorter than the others. He sounded tired. He said, "Mom, I don't know what happened. I don't know what we did. Courtney is really upset. Her mother had to cancel her trip and her sister's furious. Please call me back. I want to talk." Courtney had sent a single text message. It said, "Henrietta, I think there's been a serious misunderstanding. I never intended for any of this to play out the way it did. Reginald and I would like to come visit you when we're back from our trip and clear the air. Please let us know a time." I read both messages on the porch swing with the wind off the Gulf in my hair, and I did something I had never done before in my life. I waited a week to respond. When I did respond, it was to Reginald, not to Courtney. I told him, in a voicemail because I didn't trust myself in writing, that he was my son, and I would always love him. I told him that I had paid for a family trip in honor of his father, and that he had let his wife write me out of it like an inconvenient line item. I told him that I had a refund of $4,200 from the rental, and a refund of $1,100 from the rental car company, and a refund of $975 from a catering company I had never agreed to hire in the first place. And none of that money was going to him or his family for anything ever again. Not Aubrey's private school tuition that I'd been quietly helping with, not the down payment on the lake house they'd been hinting about, not the Christmas checks I'd written every year since they got married. I told him that I had moved the money I had saved for the trip into a different account, one I'd opened that morning at a credit union his wife didn't know existed, and that I was going to use it to invest in something my own financial advisor had recommended, a conservative mix of index funds and CDs, because a woman from a comment section had once written, in a story I'd read online, that you cannot save your way to wealth. And she was right. I told him I loved him. I told him I would always be his mother. I told him I was not available for Christmas this year, or for Thanksgiving, and that next year was undecided. I told him that if he wanted a relationship with me, it would be a relationship between him and me, not between me and his wife's family and the version of him she had molded him into. I told him I would not be hostile. I would not be cold. I would simply not be available the way I had been before. I told him that he and Courtney were not welcome to visit me in my home. Not this month. Not next. I would let him know when I was ready. And then I hung up. That was 9 months ago. Reginald has called me twice since. The first time, 3 weeks after the trip, to ask if I had reconsidered, and I told him I had not. The second time, in October, just to say hello, with no agenda, the way he used to call when he was in college and just wanted to hear my voice. We talked for 22 minutes. He didn't mention Courtney once. I think something is shifting in him. I don't know what. I am not in a hurry to find out. My daughter and her family came for Christmas. We rented a cabin in the Davis Mountains, all of us, including Patrice and Yolanda and Doreen. The twins saw snow for the first time. Marlene's wife Tasha cooked a brisket that made her father-in-law's spirit weep with pride somewhere in the great beyond. I gave the boys each a savings bond, and I gave Marlene a letter Wendell had written to her when she was 8 years old, that I had been holding on to for the right moment, and we all cried and ate too much pecan pie. I am writing this in May. The bluebonnets are gone, but the Indian paintbrush is still going strong along the highway. I have a trip planned to Surfside again in June, just me and Doreen this time, in the same little house with the porch swing. Doug sent me a Christmas card he'd remembered. I want to say one thing to whoever is hearing this. If you are a mother and your child has married someone who is slowly editing you out of the picture, and your child is letting it happen, and you find yourself wondering whether you are the problem because you are too generous, or too involved, or too much, you are not the problem. The problem is the editing. The problem is the silence of the one who should be defending you. The problem is your own kind heart, taken advantage of by people who mistook your love for an obligation. You do not owe anyone access to your money. You do not owe anyone access to your time. You do not owe anyone access to the trip you saved $14,000 for over the course of 18 months by selling your mother's china cabinet and skipping your hair appointments and buying the store brand cereal. You owe yourself the beach. You owe yourself the beach. You owe yourself the porch swing. You owe yourself the lemon cake on your 70th birthday morning with a single candle in it and 4 women you love watching you blow it out. That is all I have to say. I sat on that porch swing in Surfside on the morning of my 70th birthday with the salt air in my hair and a paper plate of lemon cake balanced on my knee, and I understood something I had not understood at 69. The trouble was never that I gave too much. The trouble was that I had been giving without ever asking myself who was receiving. There is a difference between generosity and surrender, and for 9 years, since the day my son Reginald married Courtney, I had been confusing the two. I think about it this way now. Every dollar I sent, every weekend I drove 40 minutes to babysit, every birthday card with a little extra tucked inside, those were seeds. I had been planting them in soil I never bothered to test. And when the harvest finally came, in the form of an email at 9:47 on a Tuesday morning telling me not to make it personal, I understood that nothing was ever going to grow in that ground. Not love, not gratitude, not the kind of family I thought I was building. Cause and effect is a quiet law. It does not raise its voice, but it does keep accounts. What I learned, sitting with my niece Yolanda and my sister-in-law Patrice and Doreen and Cheryl, 4 women who had walked into my life through doors I had nearly forgotten to open, is that wisdom is not the same as kindness. Kindness without wisdom is a coin purse with the bottom cut out. You can keep pouring in. Nothing stays. Wisdom is what tells you, at 69 years old, that the woman on the other end of the phone, the kind stranger named Marcia, is going to listen to you, and the man named Doug is going to do the right thing. Because there are still good people in this world, but you have to know how to find them. And you have to know when to walk away from the ones who are not. The harder lesson was about strength. I had always thought of myself as a strong woman. Wendell would have agreed. I raised 2 children. I worked 22 years in an elementary school cafeteria. I buried my husband and learned to fix the garbage disposal myself. But that morning, when I picked up the phone instead of putting it down, when I called Wanda at the credit union and I called Doug in Bay City and I canceled and froze and refunded and rebooked, I discovered that strength is not loud. Strength is a 69-year-old woman in a cotton housecoat at her kitchen table, doing the math out loud, refusing to be quiet about her own life. If you are listening to this and you recognize something of yourself in my story, I want you to hear me. You are allowed to expect to be treated like a person. You are allowed to take back what you have given when what you have given has been turned into a weapon against you. And you are allowed at any age to walk into the rest of your life on your own 2 feet with 4 good women and a cooler full of crab legs and a porch swing waiting for you. The cake will taste better than you remember.